Oi. Come on, Tree! Down with Empire!
The term cinematic has been thrown around fairly often over the last couple of years, and by now, most gamers can't help but associate it with narrow, claustrophobic levels, as well as little freedom of choice and frequent QuickTime events. All of those things are also true for Ready at Dawn's AAA home console debut, The Order 1886, but also stumbles over some of the same issues as many comparable games, and even has its own set of problems. It manages to keep you hooked over the course of its campaign, and never strays away from the premise of making you feel like the protagonist of an exciting blockbuster movie. In case you didn't already know, The Order 1886 is indeed set in the year 1886, in London to be specific. However, unlike the year 1886 you'd be able to read about in history books, the Order's version of said year features werewolves, an ancient order of knights, airships, as well as lightning guns developed by Nikola Tesla, among many other alterations to history. You step into the role of Galahad, an experienced knight who has already served the Order for a long time, thanks to a lifespan-enhancing essence called Blackwater, which is used by all of the Order's knights. As a member of the Order, your task is to participate in the war against the so-called half-breeds, werewolf-like creatures that have fought men for centuries, as well as to stop a brutal rebellion that threatens to overthrow the British crown. Luckily, you don't have to fend off all of these enemies on your own. From the get-go, you're joined by 3 comrades who aren't only good at shooting people in the face, but are also believable, 3-dimensional characters who will likely have grown on you once the credits roll. What helps these characters as well as the world around them come to life is the incredible attention to detail that can be found in almost every aspect of the game's world. Wood splinters realistically, hair blows in the wind, and glass shatters just the way you'd expect it to. Furthermore, the game looks incredibly good, which doesn't only increase the immersion, but adds to the game's driving force, its cinematic feel, as well. Since the detailed graphics make it possible for you to see even the smallest move on its characters' faces, it becomes clear that the Order doesn't solely focus on its scenic visual fidelity for aesthetic reasons. It's crucial to the game's main premise of telling you a compelling story that features characters you actually care about and immersing you in its interesting world. One of the first things you notice after stepping into Ready at Dawn's alternate version of Victorian-era London is that the game seamlessly transitions between cutscenes and gameplay. This, of course, also benefits the cinematic feel the Order is going for, and is enhanced by 2 black bars at the top and the bottom of the screen. While I do believe that those bars are in fact there for technical reasons, rather than to increase the immersion, they don't take too long to get used to and never really hold the game back. What does hold the game back though is its frequent use of QTEs that sometimes just take you out of the experience. In this case, the seamless transition between cutscenes and gameplay actually becomes much more of a problem than a positive. Since QuickTime events often appear during cutscenes, you're most of the time completely unprepared for the respective button prompt displayed on your screen, and as a result, simply die a rather cheap death. The game's atmosphere, on the other hand, is top-notch, something that is complemented by great sound design, as well as tons of additional background info that can be found around the game's world. Sadly, most of those items, with the exception of audio logs, can't be obtained permanently and can't be inspected after leaving the areas they can be found in. What's also rather irritating is the fact that you're only able to listen to audio logs while the game is paused, a seemingly weird design choice that is probably related to the huge amount of cutscenes that can be found in the game. While those cutscenes mostly help establish the Order's world and its characters and make them more believable, they are sometimes placed in spots where it would be better to simply give the player control over their character. Nevertheless, the story these cutscenes play a big part in telling is really well written and features some interesting twists and turns along the way. Even though they never really manage to hit you really hard, they are entertaining enough to keep you hooked over the course of the game's campaign. However, the focused and engaging nature of the Order 1886 story comes at a price. The game will only take an average gamer about 7 hours to complete, and there aren't any additional modes or rewards that would encourage another playthrough of the game. While I don't think that the Order would necessarily be a better game if it was longer, it's still something that should be pointed out, especially since there isn't any additional content to speak of. Save for some pretty boring and guided self-sections, the Order 1886 core gameplay is mostly a lot of fun. Sure, just like you'd expect, there are many narrow corridor-like levels you have to shoot your way through, but there are almost equally as many sections that allow you to tackle situations from multiple angles. The guns themselves also feel fresh, some of which even have additional fire modes, and have a really basic feel to them, which suits the game's world and atmosphere just fine. Given that the Order's knights don't only fight human enemies, but also have to deal with the werewolf-like half-breeds, which introduces a completely new dynamic, combat never really loses its appeal. Besides those shooting sections, there are also some neat minigames, as well as some climbing sections to lighten the mood. The problem here is that the game sometimes introduces new mechanics that only come into use a few times during its campaign, which makes the game feel even shorter and more inconsistent than it already is. It's sad to see that the focused nature of the Order's story doesn't also translate to its gameplay, which is simply held back by a feeling of inconsistency. However, at its core, the Order 1886 gameplay proves to be mostly enjoyable and features enough variety to keep you hooked until the credits roll.
Everyone alright?
Yes.
Percival, neutralize the threat on our side.
The Order 1886's attempt to create a cinematic gaming experience is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the atmosphere and its well-written story make for a compelling package. On the other hand, it suffers from a short campaign with little replay value and too many quicktime events that simply take you out of the experience. In the end, it comes down to whether you are willing to invest in an experience that will probably only last you a couple of hours, and that you presumably won't go back to anymore. If you are though, you're in for a flawed yet fun experience that fully delivers on the premise of making you feel like a part of a really awesome action movie.